Batman gets friend-zoned and beaten with a steel pipe in this movie, and yet it's still considered one of the best live-action Batman movies ever made. I'm Seth, and it's day 28 of 365, reviewing every movie I've seen in theaters with the stubs to prove it. Today's movie, The Dark Knight. Question of the day, what's your favorite animated Batman movie? What are your thoughts on Batman, Gigi? Ooh, did you see that spicy point? Good. This one's directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Christian Bale, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Michael Caine, and Heath Ledger in one of his defining and one of his final roles. Going to see this as a freshly 17-year-old kid, this was peak cinema for me. I had burned out the DVD for Batman Begins. I was absolutely ready for more in this Batman world, and I was not going to be disappointed. I saw this movie at least 5 times in theaters. I've probably seen it a subsequent 3 dozen times. It would be hard for me to recount how many times I think I've watched this movie over the years. If it's on, I'm not going to turn it off. I think it's worth mentioning, this movie gives you something new every time you watch it, whether it's you noticing something else about the movie itself or the movie pointing out something about yourself to you. There's always something to grab and learn and grow when you watch through this one. For instance, something that I hadn't caught on previous watches that is becoming really apparent to me now is the underlying anti-billionaire message in this movie. Joker's inversion of everything that we've learned about Gotham and the people in it is absolutely apropos. He's not asking why so serious as a question of their resolve. He's pointing and laughing at their hypocrisy. Look how serious you look when you're doing absolutely nothing about the condition of your city. Joker gets to laugh at their hypocrisy the whole way through while he actually does something about it. The imagery of the burning money pile becomes more and more fucking biblical as time goes on and our world changes and observes what the ethical responsibility is on someone that has billions of dollars. It's a tragedy about men trying to fix the world through money and violence and the consequences that grow out of their failure. I think this is still one of Chris Nolan's best films to this day, not because it's the coolest, but because it's the one with the most to say at the heart of it. So I know we've covered a lot of Batman ground so far in this series. If you're watching through chronologically, we already talked about Batman Begins. I also brought up Batman a lot on Joel Schumacher's Phantom of the Opera because Joel Schumacher had also done Batman movies and you could see the influences on that film. So now we're skipping ahead, moving down the timeline. We're at The Dark Knight. This movie was sitting in a really unique and weird position at the time. We had Batman movies with sequels. We even had good follow-up sequels with Batman Returns, but people had deified Chris Nolan's Batman Begins to a level that it almost felt like it would be impossible to top. So to step up to the plate, Chris Nolan brings in Heath Ledger to play a new incarnation of the Joker that we've not seen in the comics, TV shows, movies, video games, otherwise. To bring up what my early review would have been, I'll just let you know this is the first year that I gave a shit about the Oscars. So I'm freshly 17, we get to the theater, I'm there with a bunch of my friends, pick a time that I went to see it. Honestly, I think there were at least 3 Dark Knight ticket stubs with different dates in this bag. These are some of the ones that I'm giving away over on the Patreon as well. And you can see I've kept them in absolutely excellent condition. This looks like the day it was fucking printed. I've waffled on this one over the years. As a kid, I definitely loved it. I was blown away walking out of the theater. Of course they topped Batman Begins. Of course they're going to give us another movie that's going to be even better than this one. And of course this is the best Batman movie of all time. And just within my personal history, comic books were something that had been introduced to me at a very, very, very young age. A game we used to play in the 90s was called Pogs. It was these little cardboard medallions with stamps or pictures or images, and then you'd use a circular metal piece to slam them down and flip them over and trade them amongst friends. You'd have a tube to like put your Pogs into, like ammo. Or I did, at least. That's my earliest memories of comics, comic book stores, and things like that. My Pogs had comic book characters on them. You had to go to a comic book store to even get the Pogs. And this is an obsession that's going to last to this day. This is Josh Dysart's recent run called Odin's Eye. It's absolutely fucking fantastic. Here's a couple you're not going to find fucking anywhere. These are Amalgam comics, which are Marvel DC crossovers. That's the Bat Thing, so that's Swamp Thing and Man-Bat combined into a character. Here's another one, Bruce Wayne, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's the green skull you see back there behind him. So they combined, Bruce Wayne and Nick Fury. I've got a million of those. So that's my comic cred. These have been important to me, and Batman specifically, for a very long time. I'd read the encyclopedias on Batman. I'd read as many comics as I could get my hands on. I was thoroughly invested in Batman Beyond and Batman the Animated Series. He's actually one of the few characters I have no tattoos for as well, because in my personal opinion, Batman doesn't tattoo well. And that's not an invitation for you to show me your shitty fucking Batman tattoos either. That was mean. I didn't need to say all that. I just personally probably won't get a Batman tattoo. All that to say, Dark Knight was going to mean a lot to me, regardless of what happened, regardless of if it was good or bad. That was one that I was going to love walking into it. So now let's jump into the future. This recent rewatch comes at a really interesting time for me because I've been kind of waffling on Chris Nolan as a director, and I go through spurts of really, really loving him and really, really hating him and finding him really approachable and deeply emotional, and then also finding him very cold and hard to penetrate. And so I'm just always kind of swinging back and forth. But right now I'm in an era where, like, I really like Tenet and I really like Interstellar, and having rewatched them recently, I got a lot more out of them. So now to watch The Dark Knight, is this going to happen to me again? Viewer, the answer is yes. I went from loving this movie to really not liking it a lot. I would never discount it in any podcast when I talk about Batman movies, but I was usually pretty quick to dismiss this one. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Chris Nolan is better at this than I thought. Maybe there's way more layers to The Dark Knight than I had initially peeled back, and I just wasn't brave enough to dive deeper. The first thing that stood out to me on this recent rewatch is Batman's friend zoning. In 2008, friend zone is a term that you would really have only seen deeply online. I was in college at the time, so I was often on websites like eBaum's World and Newgrounds and 9gag, and one of them had bananas in the title, I think. So friend zoning is a thing that we're not really seeing represented in our media as an idea, and this movie is early to talk about this shit. Batman gets fucking friend-zoned. And not only does he get friend-zoned, but I had forgotten her reasoning for why. Something Bruce Wayne's holding on to across this movie is that as soon as there is no need for Batman, he can leave it behind and go be with Rachel. Rachel, on the other hand, an emotionally mature person that didn't have her parents murdered in front of her, which locked her in a state of arrested development, thinking that he can beat the world into submission. Rachel instead recognizes, oh, this is Bruce Wayne's true nature. It has unlocked the violent side of him, and he's choosing to try to fix our world with his fists instead of with his fucking money. She's always put off when his money comes up in the movie. And so her final reasoning in the letter is that you're addicted to this, buddy. You love the violence and you're not actually fixing our world, without saying all that to him, because she loves him dearly as a friend. And honestly, how blessed we are to be friend-zoned. What a chivalrous position to be put in, to recognize the lifelong partner potential in someone, for it to not line up and instead them say, no, but I still want you as a person in my life. How good of a person do they see you as deep down? What more can you achieve to if you're willing to love yourself the way that an emotionally mature person's willing to love you? It's a blessing and an honor for Batman, and he chooses to remain the hero. That's really deeply important. The crash out that you see in friend-zoned men always comes at the cost of their own personal heroism. You can't send the text message, "you're a bitch," to somebody that you were just admittedly in love with when they friend-zone you. That is something that a coward does. And this movie opts to say, no, we're not going to show you the cowardly, violent Batman who folds in on himself when he's friend-zoned and beats the fuck out of the Joker. No, instead, this man makes an even larger ethical decision in shutting down this really unethical computer system that he has to use to get the Joker, because the Joker has expressed, shown, and absolutely proved that he can't be caught otherwise unless they're willing to break their own rules. Now, the rule that the Joker wants Batman to break is his killing rule. The Joker sees Batman as an impotent hero. He sees him as being unable to make any change in the city, and Bruce Wayne agrees with him. I think Bruce Wayne pretty quickly recognizes that, oh, this guy actually has a point and I'm not getting much done, especially when you compare me to a Harvey Dent. And I think that's where the real genius of the movie pops out. The finale after Rachel dies, which is shocking and violent, and I had forgotten that her sentence gets interrupted. Oh, borderline sexist death, Mr. Nolan. The movie is not content to make that our finale, and instead is really concentrated on the interplay between the Joker, Two-Face, and Batman. This is our tripod of support. Who is more correct about how to help the city? Is it the violent sociopath that dresses up like a bat? Is it the violent psychopath willing to do the dirty work? Or is it someone whose mental health has been battered so much in the last few days that they're having an absolute snap? And even if we leave this metatextual reading that I really had a good time enjoying the movie through that lens in this recent rewatch, it helped me enjoy a lot out of the movie and see Batman as this is the closest to Superman that our Batman has ever been on screen. And yeah, I'm including Batman v Superman, where Batman's literally in the vicinity of Superman. There's so much difference between Zack Snyder's view of Batman and Chris Nolan's view of Batman, and Nolan gets us closer to that Superman. And I think that's why the Man of Steel trailer ends up looking like a fucking Batman trailer a couple years after this. I was in theaters watching trailers for all of these movies. I remember the glimmers of hope that I felt when I saw a trailer for something like Man of Steel after watching The Dark Knight and recognizing this is a very heroic retelling. These are really deeply archetypal versions of these characters that the Nolan-verse was kind of building towards, but couldn't allow for superpowers. Zack Snyder could allow for all the superpowers, but is not trying to do archetypes at all, and instead is doing these like flat pastiches of comic book impressions. So to leave the metatextual and go into the nuts and bolts of filmmaking, the opening scene of this, the Joker heist, still untoppable. Its ability to feed you information and rely on the fact that you've seen a heist movie, you know how this works, just trust me, I'm going to lay this information out for you, is so cool. And not a single line of dialogue in this movie is wasted. There's a scene early on between Gordon and Ramirez where she brings up her mom being sick. That's something that's not going to pay off for another 2 hours in this movie. It feels throwaway. And Nolan's editing style does, I think, lead us to throw away these lines. I don't know if that's our fault as viewers for not catching these tiny little things that fall in there, because this era is edited the fuck to hell. I think some of the longest takes in this are under 10 seconds and the average is under a second. Some movies need that. We just talked about the Bourne movies. Those are chopped the fuck to hell to add to the frenetic nature. I don't know if there's a reason to do that in a dialogue scene between two cops, especially when that's going to become such an important plot point later. I had also forgotten that Scarecrow shows up early at the beginning of this movie. Seeing Scarecrow is one of those things that makes me feel like I'm watching a comic book, and I really appreciate Nolan for sticking to that. I remember these movies being so much more realistic, especially this one. This one's so close to The Departed that the realism is really, really core, even more so than it ever was in Batman Begins, which is welcoming these trippier sequences because the Scarecrow's here. Scarecrow shows back up in this one just to have a comic book character on the screen early in the movie. He's not important to the plot, but he is endemic to the mission of this movie to say, maybe the Batman's really not doing that much good. Look, we've got gun-toting Batmans out on the street. How Chris Nolan forecasted the Zack Snyder gun Batman, I will never know, but he got that shit to screen long before Zack Snyder ever did. I knew this was going to be a longer review. I'm going to kind of cut myself off here because I know there's more Batman movies to talk about. Not only do we have The Dark Knight Rises yet, but I have BVS on this list as well. So maybe by the time we're getting to that one, we'll do an inversion and we'll talk about what I like that Zack Snyder did that Chris Nolan had a harder time doing. I want to keep this mostly positive, and I really was enjoying this watch of The Dark Knight. Maybe I've treated this one unfairly, and I think I'm big enough of a man to admit when I'm wrong, and I think I spent the last few years wrong-headedly wanting to hate this movie when there's so much in it to love. It's funny the clarity that I have now, because I remember as Zack Snyder took over the DCU and not liking the direction it was going, feeling like we had abandoned something here. And so now that the DCU is over and that's how I'm rewatching, it's cool to look back and be like, maybe we didn't abandon anything there, actually. James Gunn's Superman looks like it carries through a lot of the messages that are front and center in The Dark Knight. I think that's going to do it for this one. If you've enjoyed these reviews so far, please go check out my Patreon. I would really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm giving away some of those Dark Knight ticket stubs as well as a bunch of others for anybody that signs up. For my next trick, we will do the largest drop in Rotten Tomatoes score, I think, on this entire series. I could be wrong about that, but it's almost 90 points, from a 94% on this Dark Knight to Babylon AD's 7%. I'm a big Vin Diesel fan, even though he often shows up to the theaters in the same way Dwayne Johnson does. A lot to unpack between the two of them. This one I was going to see absolutely because I was a fan of the Fast and Furious series, and the trailer is cool. I recommend you go watch the trailer before you watch my review, and tell me that I didn't get my hopes up for nothing. That trailer looked awesome. The movie does not add up to what that trailer was. If you're watching this on TikTok or YouTube, go ahead and subscribe and give me a follow. I would really appreciate it. I asked a question at the top of this video. I'd love to hear your answers down in the comments. I'll be down in there chit-chatting away with you. I'm also posting to Blue Sky and Instagram if you want to see posts and updates. I have my stories and post updates over there. This is going to be the thumbnail, and it's going to be totally unrelated to the video.